I belong in my library because it is a structured way in which people come together to talk about all kinds of ideas, and it allows us to belong to one another. There is an agenda to harden people's hearts, and I think to go somewhere where people are allowed to remain who they are, like our soft selves, our vulnerable selves, our sharing selves. We need other libraries. We need autonomous feminist libraries. We need autonomous Ambedkarite libraries. We need community libraries that are created by small non-profits, that are so tuned in at the ground level to what that local area needs. They need to preserve seeds. They need information about that. They need to preserve a language that they're losing or a script that they're losing. They need a whole wall of those books.
Hi, welcome to Postcards, your unseen passport to all things people, policy and politics. I'm your host Nikunj, and today we are talking about libraries. Now, what makes a library powerful? Is it the books on the shelves? Is it the silence between the walls? Or is it the radical idea, I'm focused on the word radical, that anyone can ideally walk down, sit in a space, pick up a book, and find this whole magical world out there. Reading has, from time immemorial, been shaped by one's caste, one's race, one's class, one's gender, and so many other factors, which makes us think, who is the library truly for, and what is that radical idea of reading, but also reading together? And so we will be discussing this and a lot more in today's episode, discussing all things library, so that libraries don't end up in our memory as these forgotten spaces, but a radical space where we are pushing the boundary of ideas of what's possible in an everyday democratic space. Joining me in today's conversation is Mridula Koshy, and we are so grateful to have her today. Hi Mridula, how are you?
Hi Nikunj, thank you for having me.
Of course, it's such a pleasure to have you join us, and thank you so much for making time on a Saturday.
You're so welcome.
You mentioned that there was a concert last night at the TCLP, the Community Library Project.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more. That sounds very interesting.
I think back in 2015, a couple of young boys walked into the library, became members, and we were in Panchsheel Vihar then. Once, sometime later, we were evicted, ended up in Khirki, which is about half a kilometer away. They continued coming to the library. They became library leaders. Not surprisingly, they're artists. I think a lot of times people who are thinking in one sphere are thinking in another. So they were thinking in arts, but they were also thinking in the library. And our library is a place where people exercise leadership around the question of who has access to ideas and thinking, and who gets to say what they think. So they rap about everything. Later on, other young boys in the library started rapping, maybe because of these first guys. Khirki has a long history of rap. So part of what we were doing yesterday in the concert was connecting to the history. One of the original rappers in Khirki, MC Freezak, was at the concert. He has never been available before, and he was available last night. Khirki is just a very vibrant place where there's always this feeling of possibility, and I think the library expresses that, but also all of these other possibilities like the arts and culture in the community are also expressions of the people who live there. There are Ambedkarites in the community. There is a transgender community that lives there. Tomorrow in the library, a group will be gathering to discuss the transgender amendment bill. So there's always something happening in the library that's relevant to the community. And this concert was relevant to the community, so that's why we had it relevant to not only the history, but also the continuous history making. Young people writing rap are making history. They're talking about their ideas of the world, and in time that will then become the history of the world that we're in.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I'm reminded of Manzil, which...
The organization?
Yeah. by Ravi Bhaiya, and he talks about something similar, right? And how, you know, in the spaces, how Manzil evolved. Like students just came in, started as a space where community members can gather, and so many offshoots happen. There's Manzil mistakes, you know, like the students are doing all sort of things. Beautiful, wonderful things, trying to realize their potential, and sounds like TCLP.
We have had some interaction with Manzil Mystic because our third library branch in South Ex Kotla, Mubarakpur is right by Manzil Mystic. So there's some musical exchange going on there. There's some theatre exchange going on with a couple of theatre organizations. I think a library is like a great space for self-expression. Bolstered by the kind of ideas, like the couple of young guys who are key to what happened to the rap culture inside our library, which borrows from the Khirki rap culture in history. One of the key things for them was that there was a book about rap in the library. They have gone on to give workshops to really young kids who also think about rap. Workshops on, I guess, on right. I mean, I actually don't know much about rap. So
of course.
As a librarian, you don't have to know everything. You just have to bring all the knowing together in one place that people then know from one another.
I think that idea itself is very interesting. I want to stay with the Khirki. So one of the guests we were lucky to have on the podcast, and actually the episode went out last week, and so everyone is watching, please do check it out. It's with Dr. Swapna Little, who is a Delhi-based historian. You know, written some brilliant books about the history of Delhi, and she talks about, you know, as different parts of Delhi who have been, you know, settled in at different walks of time, but how people have made it their own through not just living in, but like through things like food, culture, music, and so many other factors as well. And so when you look at Khirki, it sounds like a melting point of so many, you know, different communities, cultures. How and what all have you observed Khirki as a community that way?
It is a community of migrants. Khirki is special because wherever you live is special, but I think Khirki is a lot like a lot of other places in Delhi also. Different histories but comparable, right? So whether you're in Majnu Ka Tilla or Khirki, you're going to deal with the fact that Delhi is a community of migrants. In Majnu Ka Tilla, there might be migrants from one place, and in Khirki from another place, you know. Khirki has migrants from African countries like Somalia and Congo. We have migrants, of course, from Afghanistan. I think most people know that Lajpat Nagar and Khirki and even Jangpura are where we are recording this right now are like spots that refugees have landed. There's so much internal displacement in India. The economy is, we've recently been told, is not as robust as it had been reported, that the GDP is much lower and so on. That definitely, I think, reflects people's actual experiences of having lived through the last couple of decades, watching their shrinking opportunities and having to go from here to there to search for opportunities. So Khirki is also a place where there's all this internal displacement from all over India, but especially places like West Bengal and Bihar and mostly the northern Hindi belt, a lot from UP and some from the south. So I think places where people migrate are very interesting places because they are bringing ideas from other places to one place, and then those ideas are meeting one another. Our library has books in Bengali. Our first year when we went door to door in the neighborhood of the library, and we do that every week in the library, we go door to door. One of the ways you undo historic exclusion from reading, you reference caste, race, class also, gender. These are ways in which people have been kept out of reading, structurally kept out of reading. So one of the ways you have to address that is not just by saying all are welcome, which we do and we mean it and we have robust policy to back it, but we have programming like door-to-door walks. So that first year when we went door-to-door, we met a couple of communities that we have kept meeting in Khirki. One was the Bengali community and the other was the transgender community. The very first what we call community walk we did brought us to lots of people and children and their parents and the community of parents, of people who are concerned about the next generation, who are charged with, each family is charged with making sure their children learn everything they need to learn. They were all, telling us what they are dealing with in terms of the few books that are, because we go with armloads of books and people are entranced by these picture books, some of them from other places in the world, stories from Japan or Norway, and some from our history and so on. People are absolutely filled with wonder looking at the books and wanting those books for their children and talking about how few books there are. Then there were people like from West Bengal who told us, but where are your Bengali books?
Yeah.
So our library now has Bengali books, Punjabi books in Gurmukhi. An elder gentleman supporter of our library, Dr. Chawla, made sure we connected to the Punjabi Academy and got all these beautiful books because he is concerned about the loss of script. We have an excellent manga collection in our Kotla Mubarakpur, which was donated to us by the publisher, brand new. I mean, there's, I think, like dozens, maybe even more than 100 volumes in that, and these are quite substantial. In terms of language, we have Dari, Pashto, and Somali books. We have English and Hindi, and we have this beautiful program where children individually, when they reach their 10th book, end up in this collective chart of names, and there's probably between the three libraries there might be easily 5,000 names across the walls of the libraries collectively. I know in the Khirki branch there's about 2,700 names, and it takes up 3 walls, and the names are like, each name is tiny, and then you get a star for getting your 10th book. You took it home, you brought it back, you get your first star. After that, every 10 books gets you another star. But what it is like a community of stars, of people who are reading. I think I kind of lost my point, but like people are reading as a community. And they are getting to read together as migrants from different places. And in that reading, they're exchanging ideas. The languages really matter. Keeping languages alive matter because we also code our ideas into those languages. And then we further code them into writing. And there are other ways in which people transmit ideas. The ways themselves structuring those ideas, orality being one. We don't do much with that in our library, but there is this little bit of a bridge that we have in our read aloud program. So just like the community walks being weekly things, on a daily basis, multiple read alouds, and over the years, tens of thousands of read alouds have happened in our library, not only with children. I think all over the world, people know that you introduce a book to a child by reading the book and giving them time to like read the pictures, because initially children are introduced to picture books. In our library, children and adults have read alouds on a daily and weekly basis. The Women's Reading Circle meets once a week, and it's basically a large read aloud. In these read alouds, they are able to get the text, and then they are able, when the person doing the read aloud prompts them, to think out loud about what they have heard in the text. So to think with the writer, to think with all the people in the circle with them, and to think with all the people who have read that book going back in time, if it's an old book or a recent book. So that's a lot of people gathered in that reading circle, many of them quite invisible but powerfully there. And this kind of exchanging in Khirki has felt really magical because of the different languages and the confluence of ideas people bring. Little kids talk about what is a good teacher. I think I would love for a teaching college to come and listen to them talk about what they think a good teacher is. एक अच्छी टीचर मारती है क्योंकि वो हमें बहुत प्यार करती है, and then another child saying नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है, मारना नहीं चाहिए. So this like debate and discussion at a kid level moves up in teenage years to teenage level discussions about the Constitution, about gender. And at the adult level, like I have been in a women's reading circle where women discussed marriage they discussed anger. They discussed how they express anger through banging pots and pans because they're not allowed to express it in words. So there's just a lot going on in people's heads. And how do we make it possible that they meet one another? And if they're coming from very far away from Bihar and Afghanistan, how do we make that happen? I think it's a library. That's what makes it happen. Otherwise, the books are all just sitting somewhere and dying. They're literally dying.
Of course. I mean, talking about Afghanistan, for example, one of my friends, Freshta, she runs these mobile libraries.
In Afghanistan?
Okay. And these are like, school buses which have been refurbished, and like those becomes an active sites and spaces. And she's trying to, of course, have these spaces accessible to the girls and, the women over there as well. And it's always fascinating to hear her, some of the common acts of, having a space for discourse, having a space to express yourself, that radical act of reading.
And people will say, like, we are in a digital world now and it's all available on the phone and everyone has a phone. They're describing severe, I think, pathological isolation. And the library is like a meaningful counter to that. The space absolutely matters. You have to have common areas. You have to have the commons, like people have to be able to, graze, like to come together.
100%.
And share something. The very act of that sharing, it's very important intellectually, of course, and it's very important for the ideas that are being shared. But it's also important for a very specific idea, which is the idea that things can be shared, because we exist in a world where we are being... I worked with someone who told me, this was like 30 years ago, she used to say that there is an agenda to harden people's hearts, that we live in a world where our hearts are getting harder, like we are born with very soft hearts and then we just get harder and harder. And I think to go somewhere where people are allowed to remain who they are, like our soft selves, our vulnerable selves, our sharing selves, that's very important, because
100%.
Otherwise what's going to happen if we just keep getting harder and harder? Like, whatever we are experiencing now, it's not going to stay like this. It's going to move in one direction or another. Nothing ever stays, right? It's the same. So this, what she actually said was not there is an agenda. She said there's an organized agenda. She was an organizer, and I learned organizing from her. And she taught us that there's already organization in the societies in which we live, and there is an agenda to organize that organization, that society, and we can always organize something else if we want, because this is all people-made. This is not, I was saying earlier, it's not something that landed on us, that is, like nature or natural or,
No, that is very interesting. And I mean, I'm just thinking about reading and the idea of reading. And I actually want to go back to your childhood. I'm thinking about this little kid, Mridula. And what is your earliest memory of, engaging with books or reading? Or how was that like?
Yeah, I really appreciate you brought this question later in our conversation, not immediately up front. A lot of conversations in the kind of public forums in which I've spoken about this issue, and prior to this, when I was a writer, I would talk about class, because even though I wrote fiction, my subject was class. And people often began with this question of childhood as if like who we are is just this kind of trajectory from childhood to so often it's whatever we are organized into, and otherwise it can be in my case, like I'm fundamentally someone who has always questioned even as a child, and then meeting people who trained me on how to question, like being able to go to college, being able to read Fanon, being able to understand colonization, decolonization, through the books that we read, has allowed me to look at the society we live in as an organized space, and to think about how to unorganize it. And in that, my relationship to my childhood is one of understanding, like, so much of who I was as a child was not just the child of my parents, but the child of the society I was in. So I'm a Syrian Christian from Kerala, and this means a relative level of privilege in this country. I'm a woman, which means I struggle all the time to be heard and to speak, and I have to struggle against my own internalized sense of the importance of remaining silent, so as a child, I think I was an extrovert, and then I think there was this kind of so migration for me, like we migrated when I was around between 14 and 15, we migrated to the United States. And I experienced migration as this kind of forced contortion of myself into being someone who became like hideously overnight introverted. So I was someone who talked all the time, and moved to Kerala, Bhutan, Haryana, Delhi. We did this round and went to different schools, and never really had very many books. So in terms of reading, Mridu didn't have a lot of books to read, textbooks. And one little story was, in 4th standard, I was in Haryana in Faridabad in a boarding school, and because my parents had already migrated, I was in this hostel, which was not even a hostel for children. It was just the nuns who were running the school had taken in a few orphans as their charity work, and so we were paid boarders in this space, my siblings and I. But we didn't go home in the summer because there was no home to go to. So that summer, at the end of 4th standard, the textbook room was next to my all our collective room where we slept. It was a classroom, and they had dumped all the books there, and they were sorting the textbooks in the summer holidays to move them into different piles or whatever. I got to sit in that room and read, and it was just absolutely great. So having books was great when I had it, and not having it was not great. And a lot of it had to do, I think, with the kind of place society made for me. A lot had to do with the fact that my parents migrated, that they left this country, that the leaving was actually accomplished by my mother. And she was leaving because she was a woman and she didn't want to be here. And I think we had some middle class privilege here, and we moved into the working class when we landed there. She went years ahead of us. She went when I was 8. I really didn't make the full move till I was between 14 and 15. So a number of years had gone by. What I found when I met her after many years of not seeing her was like this woman who didn't care if she was poor. She did care. I mean, it was a struggle sometimes to feed us, but she felt liberated from something about being a woman in India. And I moved back to India many years later, and I read Nivedita Menon, seeing like a feminist, and I learned a lot of things about who my mother was in that book. And I learned a lot from that book about why I feel so stuck all the time in India. It's not that there was such great gender freedom in the United States. Sometimes it's liberating to exchange one prison for another. Because a jailbreak is fun. I think my childhood was a pretty okay childhood. It was also a pretty difficult childhood because of separation from parents. I meet children in the library all the time who are living with aunts, grandparents. I meet parents in the library who left their children in the village so that they can come here and send money home. That's what my mother did, sent money home. I meet, kids who can't relate to their parents after being reunited with them. And I think the world is full of migration, actually. Probably there's always been, some people say there was greater freedom of movement in the past before we ended up with states and borders and passports and visas. That may be true. And people were moving historically a lot. But the kind of movement we're doing now often is like fleeing things, fleeing wars, and then the arrival is always difficult, because you're arriving in places where there's hostility. Yeah. Reading was very helpful in my childhood whenever I had it.
Of course.
And I've believed in reading from then to now as something very powerful.
Yeah.
But only powerful if more people have it. Less powerful when fewer people have it. Yeah.
I think what's also interesting is when you said I kind of exchange one present to another. My friend Natalie and we were just talking randomly one day. How friends talk. And we were discussing, I was asking her rather, if you have to travel to any one era or any one year in the past, where would you like to go? And she said, I can't pick anything. Everything has been bad for women. All the ages, unfortunately. So for me to be able to pick and say, hey, you know what? This is what it is. I can't pick anything. It's just worse. And the idea of imagining the world where it is truly equal still doesn't exist. We think, but it's not. And we think, relatively there is progress.
Please tell Natalie, she might have read this already, but David Graeber and David Wengrow's book, The Dawn of Everything. I feel like the second half of my life, I'm in my middle years and forward from here, has been eased by this book, because it's a historic telling of how hierarchy has been undone at times by some societies. And we tend to be presented with history as a progression, and also as a trap. Like we progress from being hunter-gatherers to being agricultural, but that was a trap, because then we had to
like pastorals, agricultural.
And becoming agricultural and then urban in that progression was supposed to be a kind of movement toward freedom, but also contradictorily it was, according to this kind of history telling, this other kind of history telling, is also like the inevitability of hierarchy, because people had to have specialization, and some people had to become cobblers and other people remained farmers, and yet other people became like prime ministers and things. So this kind of idea that there is kind of inevitability to the great freedom of having surplus as we moved into agriculture, that the surplus is a freedom, that we now have grain in storage that we can access in case there's a famine. On the other hand, all of it belongs to the king, and he will only dole it out, and then the minimum price, which is a safety for the farmer, is also lost along the way, because the king will own that also. This is, I think there is some truths to this kind of history telling, and then there's Wengrow and Graeber's history, which is like the times that people actually broke free from this. And so there's nothing inevitable about this. What my organizing teacher, mentor taught me is that we can create what we want. And what Wengrow and Graeber give us in this book is examples of people, including like feminist societies. So it's quite wonderful to find out so late in my life that other people elsewhere have tried it and even succeeded to some extent. So it's not just a jailbreak from one jail to another, but it's like an actual jailbreak.
Actual jailbreak. And even matriarchal societies, even in the present borders of India, like for example the northeast corners and other places as well. You were talking about migration, and I'm just thinking about manga as well. Like you talked about manga. I love anime.
I don't read manga, but
the question is not about manga per se. I think I love anime, and one of the things that I'm always fascinated by whenever I watch anime, watch anime, is in many of the animes, and I'm assuming that's true for a lot of other books as well, I think that fundamental question of belonging. And where do I belong? And that, when I started watching anime, right, and I'm sure that's derived from manga, I think that idea of where do I belong has always kind of stuck with me. And so when I was hearing, that you have lived here, that you have lived in multiple parts, you have had all these varied experiences, you have had your own self-realization at different points of time, not necessarily in a linear fashion. And today, if I ask you, where do you feel you belong, what would you say?
I think I belong with other people. I belong in community and in relationship. That's where I belong. I find that reading is a structured way to approach this question of belonging. The family is another structure. I also belong in my family, but reading is more liberatory for me than family, because I didn't choose in many cases my family. They're wonderful and often give me that need to belong. But even in my family, especially with my children when they were small, we read all the time to one another. And I remember a car trip where we read Last Exit, I think, the play, and it had God, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, but it has 3 parts, and one person was driving and 3 people, there were 4 or 5 of us in the car. My 3 kids and my partner and I make 5. Maybe the youngest wasn't participating, I don't remember, but we did the parts, and it made the car trip easier, and it was actually someone's homework, so we had to do it. But we've always read, when my oldest was too young to read Martin Amis's Koba the Dread, but wanted to, I just read the first, maybe 100 pages with her, and then she read the rest on her own. So the ways in which our family as a structure has allowed me to belong has also been mediated through reading. And I belong in my library because it is a structured way in which people come together to talk about all kinds of ideas, and it allows us to belong to one another.
And I think that act of just coming together and reading is beautiful as well. And I'm just thinking about libraries, therefore, the public libraries we have, and the spending that we do. And I have some figures that, in India's public library system, we spend around $0.1 per capita on public libraries. And of course, the more richer nations are spending a lot more, but still, there is a disparity, which is pretty, not just financial, but in many ways, there's also what are we focusing on as well, and how libraries are positioned or imagined and thought of as, all these spaces as well. So I'm just thinking from a policy point of view, essentially, how or why do you think libraries have been so first of all, do you agree that libraries have been underinvested?
They are systematically starved.
And so why is that the case?
So this figure is, who knows? Because nobody knows what the figure is. I've seen calculation of 7 paisa per person.
Okay.
You are saying 10 cents per person. I'm part of a reading circle, not reading circle. Lately, we've been treating it like a reading circle to work our way through the question of how different states have approached public goods and social services. And we've read Tamil Nadu and Bihar, and are reading Madhya Pradesh right now, different books. But previously, we've also worked on things like legislation and on policy. So I, along with a few other people, wrote something called the People's National Library Policy. It's available online, and it is a document, a policy for India on how we can have libraries library system that undoes systemic exclusion that we have faced in India from reading. And the fact that India does not have a national library policy is one of those places where we can see how that exclusion continues into the present day, because without a policy there is no directive to our institutions, to our government the government has not directed itself, and the policy is not the answer. A social movement is the answer. So the people have not directed their government to do this. So finally, then leadership is the answer. There has to be all social movements are led. The libraries that I work in, I hope, will produce the kind of leadership of people who have experienced what it is like to be in egalitarian spaces that are powerful through the experience of fraternity and through the experience of all the ideas being accessible to all the people. So if the library has, seeing like a feminist in it, it also has Bhimayana, the graphic novel from Navayana Publishing. It has multiple languages for Bhimayana in our library. This allows people to exchange all these great ideas in ways that potentially could produce people who say, not everyone there will do this. Some of them will become rap artists, others will become other things, but there is a possibility of people in our small libraries, and I'm seeing this possibility come true, leading on this question of like, what kind of country do we want to live in? And this earlier question you asked, oh, who do we belong to? Who do we belong to in this country? Do we belong with people across the border from us? I hope we can answer that yes, we do, that we are brothers and sisters. There's a wonderful writer from Kerala, Benjamin, who asks all these questions in his literature. And then when he was asked in an interview once, and I watched this interview, I wasn't there, I saw it somewhere, a video recording of it. He was asked why he writes, and he said, I write to find who my brothers and sisters are, or something. I'm misquoting him, but that was the idea. It was the idea of fraternity. I think we need to lead on this idea, and we need to see libraries as institutions that can lead on this idea, that if we can argue for libraries, then libraries will become the argument for the society we want to live in, that libraries can structure and create the society that we're in. So then, like corollarily, or whatever the word is, we are living in a society without libraries, so we're living without the structural aid of a library system. We need policy. It is a movement that can make a policy a reality, that can direct the government to make the libraries, and the movement needs the leaders that can do that. I hope the leaders exist in trade unions. They're not. It's not going to be enough for a small handful of libraries around this country that, like the Community Library Project, are free and open to all and that believe in this. It's not going to be possible for us to bring about this movement. We need existing social movements to see that libraries really matter in terms of right to food. Libraries absolutely matter in terms of right to information. Our right to information is being dismantled. There was this long process through which we got the legislation, a social movement, a people's call for their right to information. And now it's being dismantled because the struggle is always a continuous one. And I think a struggle for libraries will strengthen all the other struggles out there.
In your writings and a lot of your reflections, we were just talking earlier as well, you have described libraries as a spaces which is not just like an educational space, not just a reading space, but a space for larger fraternity, a space for coming together, exchange of ideas. And what I think in some of places you have drawn from Dr. Ambedkar's work as well, where he imagines and understands that democracy is not only sustained through the laws and institutions that we put up, but also through everyday social relations.
Yes.
And those challenging of hierarchies at times as a way of doing that as well.
Right.
And so I was wondering, therefore, when you imagine a library as a space for fraternity, TCLP or otherwise, how does that look like in practice?
I think the fact that libraries in India are charging fees this fact alone tells us like how committed we are to social inequality. I think Baba Sahib argued that political equality was not possible without social equality. When people are allowed to sit together as equals, because all of them paid nothing to come inside, that nothing is not only getting a person past the barrier of the marketplace, where, if you're in a mall, for example, like whether you're eating in a high-end restaurant in the mall or the food court, or maybe bringing your own paratha to the mall and taking a break from looking at windows that you cannot purchase things from, and eating in the open area. Our library in Khirki is right across from the Select City Mall. The people who built the mall were then driven out from the neighborhood around the mall. And there are some Lohar communities in the area of the mall who have clung to the spaces there. They live on footpaths that are broken, and all the other footpaths are repaired, but their section of the footpath is broken. And it just, like the instability of laying a mattress on that footpath and then putting a tirpal over that, a tarpaulin over that, it just makes you think about how those marketplace structures operate. So when you look at free of cost in a library system in India and see that it is not present, you can see the first thing that it's doing is recreating the market inside the world of ideas, which is the world of fraternity, right? We all need to be inside that world to experience fraternity. And the second thing it's doing is it's creating inequality of access, so that some people are coming in and in the Delhi Public Library system showing their BPL card, their below poverty line card, to get that 25 rupee membership, and other people are coming in and paying more, and some other people are struggling to get past the 3,000 rupee security deposit that is arbitrarily asked from people. So free really matters to get us past the market, and then to get us seated in a place where ideas can be exchanged in conversation and through shared reading, so that fraternity, that social equality is being created. When you know that you're sitting next to someone and they didn't pay more than you did, and that you and they and everyone there are there because they have a right to read, that's not mediated by the market or any other force, not by the government, not by other political, economic or gender structures or caste structures, that everyone can be in here. And that free is the mechanism through which you've come in. And that same mechanism is also not only giving you entry, but giving you this equality. Then you can see the structuring of fraternity happening. I believe we, in the absence of libraries, are living in societies that are structured to be unequal and therefore destructive to fraternity. You cannot have fraternity with someone who you are the superior of or the inferior of in anyone else's eyes. So we need all kinds of libraries in India, but we need public libraries that are spaces of fraternity through the removal of this barrier of payment and inequality. We need other libraries. We need autonomous feminist libraries. We need autonomous Ambedkarite libraries. We need community libraries that are created by small non-profits, that are so tuned in at the ground level to what that local area needs. They need to preserve seeds. They need information about that. They need to preserve a language that they're losing or a script that they're losing. They need a whole wall of those books, in Gurmukhi or whatever. They need, there's like libraries for marine biology, they specialize subjects, scientific libraries. We need all of those, but we need a public library system that is free, because that is where we will be working on fraternity.
I think when you talked about the economics of it, I think, and the accessibility or the restriction of that accessibility because of the economics of it is such an important point. I'm also thinking about, from an overall fraternity point of view, at times the public spaces that we have also become a mirror of a larger society as well. So if in a particular space, we know untouchability is still practiced in many parts of India. We have caste-based discrimination, we have religion-based discrimination. In different parts of the world, there's race-based discrimination, gender-based discrimination. across the gender spectrum, and geography, and like there's so many other things. So when we also think about libraries and beyond the economic point of value as well, how do we also build that fraternity in us when we imagine this library, which is also cutting through all
I'll
of this?
talk a little bit about some of our practices inside our libraries as examples of things that we have developed, and there's many more things to develop.
Of course.
But many of the things we have developed are quite universal. But before I get to that, I do want to say that caste exists inside capitalism. There's nothing almost on this planet now that does not exist inside capitalism. So capitalism acts to preserve a caste hierarchy. Capitalism acts to preserve patriarchy, ableism, race. It manufactures race so that there can be racism. This is what I don't know how to say his name, Ta-Nehai C. Coates has written about. Okay. So about how race is created as a way racism can operate, like that racism is not some natural outcome of a natural thing called race. I mean, men are naturally stronger than women and therefore, and so on. I think moving to practices in our library, I talked earlier about the honor roll board. I don't think I named it. The board where the thousands of names are there across the wall, and stars are there. And what children, when they come into the library and point and say to their friends is, there's my name. And what they're saying is, there's the community I belong to. It's a community of readers and thinkers, and we're very powerful. Because that's really visually quite nicely depicted in all the names being collectivized. And there's no first or second or ranking or order. Other programs like out loud reading are very, very important. I mentioned it in passing before that we do all these read alouds and women's reading circles, and this is very important, because when we read individually by buying a book, and maybe we carry it on a flight to show that we read on flights. Apparently some Bollywood stars have been carrying books as accessories, as a way of saying that, and maybe they read them also. But the book has become a marker of privilege, which it is, but the flaunting of that privilege, right? The signaling of who you are in the hierarchy, that is constructed by capitalism, and that is constructed through the market and through the availability of books in that way, so that when you read that book after going through the market to acquire it, you read it in a very particular way. You read it as a product of that. So reading is essentially socially constructed. When you read in your drawing room and you draw the curtains to keep the world out, and you turn on the lamp because now your drawing room's a little darker, and then you start reading in privacy, in isolation. And you experience, sort of inner journey as you're reading, and that's all wonderful. It's one experience of reading, but it is the experience of reading that we have constructed, because we have the market that constructs us all the time. Previous constructions of reading included like things in the Manusmriti about pouring lead into the ears of the person who overhears the scriptural text as it is recited, because reading was recited. And so there were other constructions. That was a time when caste was not constructed through capitalism, but now it is constructed through capitalism. So when you look at the mall, which is a construction of capitalism, and you see a Banjara community sleeping on broken pavement, you're seeing that capitalism has constructed them in a way. Like the nomadic culture now exists inside capitalism. So it no longer exists pastorally or on hills alone. It also exists on construction sites that have never healed. And in our library, when we read aloud, we are socially constructing reading as an act of sharing, not as an act of privacy or isolation, but as an act that is acquiring a different meaning through my hearing someone else's thought about something. That so I read, I hear the first voice, which is the voice of the text. I hear my voice, which is my voice interrogating that text, of feeling the text as balm that soothes me, as feeling the text as provocative and angering to me, as feeling the text as a call to action. Whatever I'm feeling, if it is balm, I want to turn to the person next to me and say, do you feel soothed? I do. If it is a provocation, I want to say, I don't like this, you know. And if the other person says, no, that's not what it's saying, you know. Or if they say, yeah, I feel the same as you do, let's have a movement about this, you know. There's so many things that can happen when people share text. And there are so many places in the world historically where this has happened. In beedi factories in Kerala, where trade unions constructed social reading through a person reading while other people were rolling their beedis, right? They were constructing a different experience of reading. Among other things, they were constructing inclusivity and fraternity, which we discussed earlier, because everyone is able to be inside that reading because the person reading is bringing everyone in. And in our read aloud, we actually structure pedagogically and in terms of the curriculum we have constructed to do this practice and program of read aloud. We have constructed a process of asking one another to hear what we are each thinking and then to share what we are thinking. So the reader might stop. I'm not sure if in the beedi factory this happened, maybe it did, but the reader might stop and say, what do you think? You know, or the reader might, in preparing to read a text, note the places in the text that they were surprised or that they were sorrowed, and make a point, maybe put a sticky note there and make a plan, a lesson plan, that today when I read aloud to the women, I will pause here and say, that makes me so sad. And then wait to see if other people in the room have feelings about this, you know. That makes, I think, a different social experience of reading. In Tamil Nadu, the Padipagams, the reading rooms that were created were spaces in the maybe mid-1900s that were part of the Dravidian movement and came at an earlier point from Periyar's use of this as an organizing tool to bring people together, to the DMK using it as an organizing tool to bring people together, to spaces that then became socially constructed spaces where reading is shared because one person reads aloud and other people listen. We are all hearing the same text, having our thoughts and then collectivizing them. I attended a talk by a scholar named Shibi Lakshman who talked about this movement, and the talk was entitled Reading is a Radical Act. But he was saying that this particular social construction of reading is a radical act. Reading can be an exclusive act, but how it can also be a radical act. So we have to construct reading as a radical act, as an act of dissent, as an act of questioning, through which we then form our dissent, and then through which we form our ability to have alternative societies. You know, if you read Sultana's Dream, it is someone thinking about an alternative society, a woman's jailbreak. You know, in her imagination in this work of fiction, she is outside the jail, and the people who have kept her in jail are inside the jail, and with her are all her sathis. You know, the entire gender is out there with her. Experiencing freedom, and everyone in our library who reads this text, and we have this text in the library, gains more from it when they do not read it as an exclusive act through the mediation of the market, because that's who mediates it these days, or even the state as a force of the market, but reads it as a social act of constructing equality through sharing and fraternity inside the library. That then can be a starting point of dissent for people.
I think there's so much to unpack there in what you said. I think even like some of the examples that you quoted within India, and how the imagining of what a library is and what it could be, and even the reading as a radical idea in itself as well. And I was thinking, so when you were imagining TCLP, right, were there certain models within the country, outside the country, that kind of really influenced your thought process? And therefore, like if someone is watching us right now, they're like, oh, I want to start a library. Whatever shape or form it takes. But you're like, oh, these are some of the things that I've really thought about, over the years. And these are some of the models that have really inspired me as well. Or you feel like that in India, we need like a complete reimagining of whatsoever, that no model so far. Of course, it depends on context, but it can truly fit what it is.
No, I mean, of course, we have to tinker with the thing, not only because we are India, but we've only been India for a very short time. For thousands of years, we were not India.
Yeah.
I think we're just people, and things that work for other people do work for us also. Even things that work for our colonial rulers, the British, because they're also just people. I mean, working class people are the bulk of the people there, and working class people are the bulk of the people here. When I first started TCLP with a bunch of other people, and we don't describe ourselves as founders, we were tinkerers, and we definitely believed in course correcting. We made a lot of mistakes. People we meet now and have met along the way, many more have started libraries that didn't succeed than those who have started libraries that succeeded. So for anyone who's thinking to start a library, it's a good idea to course correct as you go. Out of necessity, we learned to course correct. We didn't have a plan to course correct. As we went forward and it didn't work, the only plan we had was to not blame the people who didn't come, or who came and scribbled all over the book because they were 3 years old. What program do we need where children don't scribble on books? Or why did they scribble on books? What understanding do we need to formulate? What pedagogy would help us to set up a scribbling corner in the library so people can scribble to their heart's content and then come sit in a read aloud? These kinds of course corrections were formed from a belief that everyone will read because we're all able to. All of us who started were so different from one another also, and came from such different places, that we were able to agree that this is probably going to work for anyone, that reading will work for anyone. And that the barriers are what we need to encounter. And the person who's not reading is not in themselves a barrier. That a community that is not reading is not a barrier to reading. There are barriers between reading and that community, and then we need to figure out what those are. Along the way, we've come up with curriculum, pedagogy, programs, practices. Our shelves are open. There are no metal almaris. There are no locks and keys on the books. Free browsing, freedom to choose, freedom for a child to go to the adult section, bring a book. Of course, the librarian is a leader and is going to say, are you sure you really want to read this 350-page book? I mean, there are kids who read books according to the weight of the book, which is to say they take it home, they try the first few pages and they bring it back and they feel so satisfied. And there's a place where that is a good thing. And then there's a place where you want to figure out that this child loves sports, and we have a whole shelf full of books about football players, and you can read about Pele, and you can read about who they were and see pictures and learn about sports you've never heard about. There's a book about lacrosse in our library. So there's a lot of reasons why a librarian might suggest a different book to a child. But generally in our library, there's complete freedom to go where you want. To pick a Bengali book, even if you don't know how to read Bengali. Mistakes happen. A very young teenager took home Thanda Gosht, and which is Manto, and it was terrible. The mother was so angry, and we had to work so hard to repair that relationship, and we had to think about what rules and policies we have in the library that govern how books go out and who gets them. So you have to be very thoughtful, but you have to mainly course correct a lot, because people will read. People will read in India just like people read in Manchester. And these are very artificial constructions, India. So people will read.
I think I really like the word tinkerer, first of all. Like the way you describe yourself, and I think other folks. you talked about the failings, like, certain libraries failed, like, me and a couple of my friends, Sami, Prachi, Sneha, when we were Teach India Fellows in Sangam Vihar, we started a small learning center and a library as a space just to bring students that we were teaching during the school time together. So they can use that space as an after-school space, to explore different things. It was also a space where we can do more programs and things, which was not able to be possible at all times during the school calendar as well, and also as a space for reading, as a place to borrow books, read, have a discourse at times amongst each other as well. And the space doesn't exist today. Like over the years, we couldn't sustain it, and there were different things that played a role in that. And I was just thinking about like the principles that you were highlighting, and I was like, some of that makes a lot of sense, and we didn't do many of those things. We wished we were more aware. We wish, we thought more about that as well. So
can I add something here about failing?
Yeah.
We closed a library that we opened. It was the pandemic, and in many ways we were able to get away with it because it was a library full of 3 and 4 year olds, 5 and 7 year olds. It's so painful to think about because nobody shouted at us. Nobody held us accountable. We sat down as a board, the board for the community library project, and made a decision that we could not financially support that library. We had just opened it, and then the pandemic started. Funding that we received dried up, and something had to be ended. And somehow we justified it to ourselves by saying that it is the newest one, so we can let it go. We owe the least over there because they hardly know us and we hardly know them. And it was wrong in so many ways, but the bigger wrong, and we keep this in front of us, is that we were never supposed to do this. The only way the program in Sangam Vihar could have sustained itself long term is if it was a publicly owned good in which you came in for the amount of time that you could come in to work on it. I've had to give up like a lot of things in my life to do what I do, and I'm very glad to have given those things up because they were lesser things to me, and what I have done is what I wanted to do. I don't feel bad about where my life is, but many people who have come into TCLP over the years have left also. But TCLP continues because a handful of people, my fellow board members, there's like this completely indomitable woman, Shauli, who works 7 days a week. I don't work 7 days a week. I don't know how she does it, and everybody is in awe. But that kind of energy level that she's bringing is something she's doing voluntarily because she wants to. But we cannot tap that all over the country to create the system that our people in this ordering of our people, India, needs. It doesn't exist, and we need it. We need the government to take responsibility for creating a public library system. People like me cannot do it. People like me, on occasion, here and there, do it because they decide it's the thing they want to do. But we would be we would be right to conclude that it shouldn't be us, because if tomorrow a brick falls on my head, I think it would impact TCLP. And my goal always in TCLP is to and I was taught this in the movement, in the labor union movement when I worked there, is to replace yourself. I think all social movements have this as a, replace yourself. So I've been working to replace myself. But there is no possibility that the community library project or any trade union, Seva, or any other AICCTU, these are trade unions we've tried talking to, and they've been very supportive of the idea that workers have the right to read, that people have the right to read, that this should be a trade union issue. But the goal is to have a social movement that brings about a public library system, which means that as a public, we take responsibility for funding it through public financing, that our elected leadership sets up the policy and the structures through which it will be governed, and that will replicate itself. So the 3 and 4 year olds in Sector 43 in Gurgaon do not lose their library because funding dried up. That's just tragic.
Yeah.
And it's maybe criminal.
Yeah. I think that idea that I think that personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Just because someone can't hold you accountable, I think in their mind they're still, in some ways, because they're losing, they can't articulate it, they can't say it in so many words at times, or maybe and that time I'm not cheering them for it. Sorry.
Yeah. Just now, because we've not been able, as the library has grown in our smallest physical space, we have not been able to provide space safely to children and adults. We have made a decision recently, because the growth in the number of people using the library is so much that we cannot seat, your 16-year-old and your 25-year-old together easily. One is a child and one is an adult. What it would take to manage that seating in terms of the librarian being vigilant for the child's safety has resulted in us just in the last weeks doing a program called Library Banto, Share the Library. Share the Library means children who used to be able to come to the library 6 days a week are going to come to a library that is all their own, meaning they'll get twice the space, but only for 3 days a week. And they are the loudest voices internally in our wonderful space of fraternity have been from adults saying, tell the children to go away, give us that space back, because they cannot come in when the children are there. Those half days, 3 days that the children are using the library as their own safe space has been a loss for the adults, many of whom are in such almost, I find them to be in an almost agonizing pain. Like when I said that migration was for me an experience of being physically contorted into a new and lesser shape, and I've lived in that shape ever since. I see this UPSC process, in which so many young adults in our library come in and are being sort of, in the olden days there was this thing called the rack. It was a torture machine. You would get stretched over it and then a different kind of contortion. It breaks your bones slowly. I watch people sitting year after year through failed exams that they have failed, through a system that cancels exams, through a system that gives you an exam ticket in Bihar when you live in Delhi. That was your fourth choice because it's your home village. Through all of these crises that I've seen, oh my God, this young woman who took 3 Rapidos to go to a test center so far away, arriving panting. How could she possibly have done in that test? She wouldn't have done as well as she might have. And in any case, what are they testing people on? Like the literature test someone shared with me, some of the questions were like, I don't remember if it was Thomas Hardy or someone, like, was Middlemarch written in 1800 and this or 1800 and that? And it's like, really? Like, ask people to write an essay on how the historic period relates to the book. Don't ask them which year. That's absurd. So through this kind of absurdity, people are being tortured in the library. So then sometimes they respond selfishly and they say, save me, don't save the child. We're not saving anybody, but there is this physical space that feels safe to people, a space that they can study in because their society requires them to grind themselves through studying. They might be thinking about all kinds of other things, or writing poetry, or wooing someone with poetry, or wooing themselves with poetry, but they're not, they're studying. I did tell those young adults that the children have not said what you're saying. Maybe they would if they weren't children. Maybe they would say, get rid of the adults, me only. But they're children. They didn't think they could say it, so they didn't say it. But the adults did. And I think a lot of adults rethought the whole thing. Every struggle is an opportunity to reorganize ourselves. So this struggle of sharing the library has, I hope, allowed us to deepen our relationship with fraternity. It's hard sometimes, though, to deepen your relationship with fraternity when you feel such paucity, such lack.
I mean, you were talking about UPSC students and like just the competitive tests, and so many students just huddled over year on year. And you go to different libraries, even in Delhi or generally, and most of the time the students that are there are the ones who are preparing for tests and all. We also know spaces like Rajendra Place or that kind of area where there's a lot of UPSC
Oh,
tests.
yeah. Near Karol Bagh.
Near Karol Bagh. And there are libraries
There's
there.
thousands of libraries there.
There's libraries there. I think there was a very unfortunate situation where in one of the
the
basements,
basement.
but there are a lot of libraries there where
Three young people drowned.
Exactly. And there are spaces like those there as well, where like those are also libraries, but where like the whole idea is that you have a space and you're like studying and like you're preparing for tests as well. And then generally in public libraries, often many times in Delhi, is the test prep folks who are mainly coming in and using those kind of spaces as well.
Yeah, our libraries are inundated with adults. And even without a library sharing program that limits the number of days you can come in and the age by which you can come in, we have on a daily basis, seen 80, 100 youngsters arrive in one of our libraries and really just run out of seats and then feel the pressure on them, like I'm here, I want to study because that's my only way forward in the economy, the way it is set up, in the way in which I'm a market commodity myself, being purchased and sold, and I'm going to improve my marketability through the studying that I'm doing. The government has some libraries in Delhi now, Aram libraries. These are in partnership or something, and they are charging higher fees than other government libraries, which may charge 100, 200 rupees for reading room access, but here now they're charging 1,000 and so on. And these libraries have no books and so on, but most of all, the programming of fraternity through entry and seating and meeting others, and through meeting others through the shared ideas of shared reading, and then the sense of community as a library is missing in these libraries. And I'll tell you something, the starting point for many is the fee to enter, then it is the sitting in the chair. You have paid for 8 hours, you're going to try to sit that 8 hours, and there's actually a barrier between you and the other person. They set it up with these dividers. Our libraries don't have dividers. There are tables and people seated, and at 5 p.m. there's tea and rusk or biscuit or some little bit of something, and 80 people will get up from their chairs and go drink a cup of tea. And there's an invitation to step outside and play Uno in the courtyard. One of the members of the library quite often brings his guitar. I believe he studies, and then he brings out his guitar, and 5 or 8 people will sit with him and they'll sing in the courtyard. Then they'll go back to study. And we program this so that people are coming in for free and as equals. There is no design barrier to them meeting one another, and there is designed efforts to get them to be their other selves, not just their effort to market themselves, but be the self that wants to write. I in my bag I have the short story a member has written in the library. In my WhatsApp chat I have another story from another member of the library, and because I used to write, sometimes members of the library will ask me to read their writing. Everyone's a writer. Everyone in our library is a writer. Kids are scribbling all the time, and we have workshops, and we have book launches, and we have author visits, and all these ways in which people meet one another. And then tons of people will take that break with tea and scribble some thoughts down. And that's a very different version of themselves than the one that is owned and operating according to the rack to which they're being submitted. I know I'm very dramatic in my language, but I feel like everything I'm seeing is very dramatic. I'm seeing people reduced and struggling to not be reduced, and the library as a place where they expand. I think like what Benjamin said about I write to search for the other person, my brother, my sister. I feel like in our library, people expand to include other people, like this collective consciousness that is the best version of us, right? Like it's a wonderful version of me that I found in the library, where I am reading writing written by other people, and it's really great.
Yeah,
it's very pretty.
It was just, I like chaos, so there's a hint of chaos in everything. I was also thinking about, we have been talking about physical spaces. There's a space where communities coming together, and you have been talking about also these spaces beyond boundaries, like or the geographical boundaries that exist today as well. So I was wondering, what are your thoughts on or imagining of a library which is not bound by a particular geography, with a sense of fraternity, right? And so maybe virtual library, maybe something else as well. If we have to imagine like something like that, how would that like?
Are you asking like if a library was not a physical space, then what would it be? I mean, I've said a lot about the importance of the physical space because people do need to meet. We have a digital branch, so we are 3 branch libraries in the community library project, which are physical, and 1 branch library which is digital. A big component of it is just WhatsApp groups. And we have some volunteers who create the content that's shared weekly, and we have about 4,500 families that receive the content. A lot of the content is housed on the web and sending people places, and then some of the content is our own internally created content, and people stay within that circuit. Then I think generally it is not good for children to spend much time in these digital spaces. And it's not just about stranger danger, unsupervised time on the net, someone will contact your child. I think the market will contact your child. Your child's attention is being valued, and microseconds of our attention is being bought and sold online right now. How long you look at one ad versus another ad. On Instagram, they give you a range of ads, and you can choose to click which ad you want to see. And you're teaching the system who you are, but simultaneously the system is teaching you who you are. So this dynamic is particularly poisonous for children who need more freedom to move around in the world, meet one another, and get a sense of who they are. Beyond their family, they need to get a sense of who they are from a physical world in which they interact, who they are in relationship to a tree, or who they are in relationship to the act of running. All of which, in terms of motor skills, in terms of the creative self, are fundamental to development, because the big issue with children they are developing. Now, arguably, we are developing all the way through our lives, so arguably we all should be spending less time in this place that isolates us from one another. And the fact that the space doesn't belong to us maybe is the real factor here, right? So our digital content and our digital library tries to be a space where people belong, in that we are creating the content about them, for them. Sometimes there might be we had a concert last night, so now there will be like video content that's shared, and every artist was from the area, from the physical Khirki area, and for them to be seen in their community as they walk around as artists. I'll tell you a story. After the concert, it was maybe 11 o'clock at night, and it had rained on and off throughout the evening during the concert. The performers had left the stage and held microphones over, umbrellas over their microphones, and continued performing, and the bulk of the audience had stayed, and so on. When all was said and done, and we were packing up, till past midnight, at about 11 something, our director, running between the library and the park where we did our concert, met someone on the street who said, "Aap library ke bacche अच्छे कर रहे हैं, and you're doing well, you children of the library." That's a bad translation, but and then he carried his umbrella over her and her group to the library, even though he was not going there. So I just think that who we are, where we belong, should be something we decide. And if we are in a virtual library, it should be free of the market, free of the way in which decisions are made about us, decisions to teach us who we are, decisions to own us in incremental microseconds, to own our attention. When I see that parents in the library are giving children the babysitter, that is the phone. I can see or the parent is not seeing the child and is using the phone as a pacifier to self-soothe. I can see this way in which both the child and the parent are ending up owned by forces that are malevolent. And whatever virtual library we create, like our digital library, one component of it is its relationship to the physical. If there is a physical concert, there will be digital content, and it will be content that people in the library created. All the things shared on that WhatsApp, when I said volunteers, they're like just people in the community who give time to put together and curate digital content that's meaningful to them, that is about who they are. A lot of it is a self-depiction, and I find that very fascinating because how we are depicted in Bollywood. A very simple thing, I'm going to a wedding. One of our young community leaders is getting married on the 20th, which is day after tomorrow, I think, on Monday. And I asked her like what color she will wear, because this is a thing where she's from Bihar, and I don't know actually what color she will wear. She didn't definitively answer when I asked a few weeks ago. But people are losing the colors they chose, which were different colors, and are now choosing the color that is depicted in Bollywood as the color, red, you wear red. In Bihar, you wear yellow. And in Kerala, you might wear, like where I'm from originally, where my roots are, there are other colors, including white. So there's a flattening out of human beings, that is not good for us. Our variety holds answers to our survival. How we will move forward into the next generation and thrive into many generations from now is highly dependent on the number of options available to us. So Bihar presents options for us that we need to value and not flatten. And I think this business of being owned through media, through Bollywood, through social media, through Instagram, is problematic for that loss of diversity, for that. In addition to the individual self being lost in the attention being taken from them, the parent not paying attention to the child, there is also the collective loss of our wonderful diversity as human beings, our many answers to the questions that arise. And that can have profound effects for us. So whatever virtual library should have a relationship to a physical library, to the community that is using it. Ownership should be with the community, and it should not be dictated from elsewhere.
And earlier we were talking about women in the libraries as well, in your libraries as well, and historically how women have been excluded from many public spaces in general as well, how women's time and leisure itself is so gendered, and a lot of the time being dictated by domestic responsibilities, millions of other things and factors, and those things. So how do you think, when you think of a library, or in this case your library as well, how do you see that experience of a woman being evolving or changing? And has there been anything that you've heard from some of them which you were kind of unexpected for you?
I mean, what's unexpected is women's resilience, but then it shouldn't be unexpected because historically we've hung in there after 5,000 years of being, stepped on. So that's crazy good for us that we do that. It's been remarked many times by people in our library, community leaders, librarians, that when they go door to door and they talk to women, they never stop working while you're talking to them. That a woman is always scrubbing a pile of clothes when you talk to them, or feeding a child, or they have so little leisure. And this was true even pre-capitalism probably, in terms of, like, as much as we are now owned in various ways by the market, we are also owned for women and everyone that is owned by patriarchy, arguably men and boys too, that we are owned in ways that are distorting us. So the women's reading circle, sometimes there is the surprise of a woman repeating things that is not affirming of herself. Most often, what I see in the discussions is people holding one another up together, so that even if someone pulls herself or her comrade down, others are lifting. So I find that overall everyone is lifting. And that's why I think collective intelligence is much more important than individual intelligence. We do a program in the library where we also read in the parks around the library. We read in the schools around the library also, but we read in the parks also. There's designated days, times where these things happen. Schools are like every day that the school is open, we're in the schools. But the park is, I think, once or twice a week. And in the very, hot season or very cold season, it might drop down to 0 times a week. Women who do domestic work often use the parks as a place to shelter during the lunch break or during the gaps between homes, because a woman who's a domestic worker, especially these days, no longer works in one home, works in multiple homes and is running. And even the tasks in a home is divided among 2-3 people. In well-off homes, someone comes to clean the bathroom and someone else comes to clean the or to do the kitchen and the vegetables and so that is caste in operation inside the marketplace, and then with patriarchy. And both of those women come out, the one who cleaned the bathroom and the one who cooked the food, and they take a break in a park, and then we read with them. And there's something very different happening there than was happening inside the household. And I think that's also a very surprising thing, which is the resilience thing, is that the women want to sit together. They have been told that there is a hierarchy and you in the kitchen are better off than you in the bathroom. But then they're sitting together to read. So that's kind of wonderful, right? Like people keep coming back to what really matters to them is that they belong with other people and that they are brothers and sisters, and that we really are people who feel our best when we are with others.
I mean, I think one of the best examples of democratic resistance, for example, and in the recent history which was led by women, was like the Shine Bagh protest, for example, as well. And I think,
and remember what they said about the women, that they were paid off, that they're, I mean, really, I went to those rallies, and we were there at some point, like daily. And a long time ago, in the early 1990s, there was a woman, Maria Elena Durazo, who was the president of Local 11, HERE, Hotel Employees, Restaurant Employees, in Los Angeles. And I was like maybe 21 or something, and I was in the audience when she took her baby and stepped up on the stage to address all these undocumented, mostly workers, migrants from Central America. And we were students and we were there in solidarity. It's been decades since I've seen women lead a movement, and I saw it when I was 21. I also worked in a union which was led by a woman, Alice Dale, and the person who taught me organizing, Amy Steer, was a communist and a woman. And it's been decades since I've seen women. And when I went to Shaheen Bagh, it was amazing to see the women on stage.
And when I went there, and I'm sure you would have also seen like a bus stop being converted into this space.
And the overhead footbridge with the banners hanging to the street. You know? These depictions of like India and the Constitution. It was amazing.
It was beautiful. And
it was beautiful.
And the library over there as well. I think it's called Fatima Sheikh Savitribai Phule Library. So when you were there, you know, how did you see the idea of library, therefore, you know, existing in the space of dissent?
I don't know because I haven't read about this like in like an academic work or a scholarly work. I'm sure it exists. Someone must have done the scholarship into how reading is an act of dissent, and how spaces of dissent then adopt reading as a way of dissenting. I know there's a book out right now about the Padipakam movement, the reading room movement in Tamil Nadu. So there are these books. I need to read that Padipakam book also. Attending the talk by Shibi Lakshman was so important, where he talked about that movement, to understanding that actually when people protest, because this was true for the farmers when they came to Tigray border, just as an individual I went out to see what was happening, and there were multiple libraries in one protest site. And this was true in the Occupy movement in the United States, that people set up libraries. There's a big article, perhaps in the New Yorker, by people who participated in the Occupy movement library in New York, the big one that took place at Wall Street, I think. And how, so all of these, whether it's the Paris Commune or Shaheen Bagh, they set up alternative societies, right? So part of what you do when you are protesting is you imagine, you're protesting against something, and you're trying to imagine where would you like to be instead. You would like to have this street serve purposes other than moving goods. You would like it to move your idea of freedom. So you're going to sit down and block the street. You would like it to be the place of your power. So the women became powerful in that place. The library as an expression of that culture and idea of justice, right? That, like, it is the idea of where we want to go. We want to live in a world where there are libraries. So when we imagine Shaheen Bagh, we imagine that there will be no citizenship that is a barrier to people belonging together, that there will be no discriminatory citizenship that targets Muslim people for non-citizenship and renders them second class, and perhaps even in internment camps. Maybe what happened to Uyghur Muslims with their Uyghur Muslims in China have been put in internment camps and have been put through a indoctrination process where they have to renounce who they are, and have also been cheap labor, the way African American prisoners in the US have become a big part of how the market interacts with the African American population through imprisoning them and then extracting labor from them. Some of the hideous examples in history, like in World War II, in Germany, the camps were using the last calories from the workers' bodies, the Jewish workers' bodies, the gay workers' bodies, to extract labor before they were killed, right? There is a wonderful article, maybe 2 decades ago in The Atlantic, I think, called The Shipbreakers. And it's about workers in Maharashtra, where the ships are driven to shore and then dismantled, and how people are seeking that grueling work over other work which actually starves them more than this work does. Like, people are expending more calories working than they are able to feed themselves through their earnings. This article gets into that. Now, we know the malnutrition rate in India or the anemia rate in India is unforgivable. So when people protest all this, they want to imagine what would it be like if it was different. When the Paris Commune was a huge exercise in imagination, right? And so was Occupy, so were the farmers. They didn't just argue against what is happening to their grain finding their way, their labor finding their way to a marketplace without safety. They argued for freedom. They argued for justice. And so part of that for them was having books. And that was true in Jamia and in Shaheen Bagh. I want to remind us that the first attacks from the police and the state against the people protesting took place in the Jamia University library. Libraries are spaces that contending ideas come into being, Like, when we want to imagine a new world, let's make a library there and see what that looks like. And let's not forget that probably we will be attacked there because other imaginations exist, hierarchical ones, totalitarian ones, ones that lack in freedom for people to thrive. So libraries are, I think, places where contending ideas come into conversation and erupt. I want to see like that eruption take the form of that new world we're imagining. Alongside libraries, they were giving food to people. Everyone could have food. Children were drawing and scribbling like mad. Everyone could express and be creative. No one was saying, sit down and study. Women were moving freely on the street. They were loitering and leading, both. So there was so much imagination, and books could only have helped, We can have a study space. And then a library can have sympathy for the people who are studying and serve them tea and bring them into other conversations where they experience other selves.
Of course. And as we wrap our conversation, I want to ask you final couple of things. One is just that we're just talking about imagining, right? So this is 2026. And so what is your reimagined version of a library, I don't know, for the year 2050 or something, which is very radical, like as radical as, futuristic, imaginative, whatever words you want to put it.
I mean, wouldn't it be nice for us to be in that society that's envisioned in Shaheen Bagh, one where women move freely and where there are flourishing libraries inside which women move freely and inside which women find the strength to come out and keep creating that world. I don't think we human beings will ever live in a world where we are not contending over what we are creating in that world. What is this world? So I imagine that the library of the future is a library where people find strength to keep creating. Some people talk about how the revolution is constant, the struggle is forever. I mean, these are like phrases, but for me, they have that meaning that in my own life, I've seen that one can't stop creating and that it's also very satisfactory to keep creating. So I think the library of the future is a place where the society creates the library so that the library can create the society in a more egalitarian, emancipatory way than in the one in which we are. There may be some other libraries and their imagination through which some other worlds are created, but that's not the one I'm talking about. If you're giving me full freedom to imagine, then I want to imagine that justice prevails.
I think that's a beautiful vision. And there's a question that we ask all our guests. So do you have certain recommendations? So in terms of, any 3 things to read, any 2 things to watch or listen, and 1 person to follow? Oh
no, I'm very bad at this. You should have warned me.
Sorry.
I just read Asad Haidar's Mistaken Identity a couple months ago. I didn't know he existed, and he passed away, and then I discovered him because he passed away, because people were tweeting about it, and I found such great strength, because in our neoliberal economy, our rebellions are then marketed to us in lesser forms, and this version of our need to take our subjugated identities and find pride in them has then been resold to us in ways that are tokenistic and in ways that render us less powerful, because ultimately then identity politics, which comes out of this liberal economic framing of what was a wonderful movement of solidarity among people who understand that their identity can be a source of power for them, a source of pride for them, but also a source of alliance with other subjugated identities. That is the meaning of intersectional politics. Intersectional politics is not the layering of oppressed identities to find that one tokenistic board hire, who ticks 5 boxes. And Asad Haidar's book really just opens this up in the simplest kind of, like lucid, like you can understand and follow it. It's some theory escapes me. I cannot read theory very easily. I'm sure that if I had to struggle with it, I could make headway. I see children in the library who have had very little access to reading in the school system come in and struggle and make headway and be able to read. So I'm sure I could. But I really appreciated Asad Haidar's book. So I'll just stop at recommending only one book.
Okay.
There's so many great books, and I mentioned earlier the Van Gogh Graeber book, and if I could be reborn in any other space and time, I want to live in Iceland, and I want to meet Halldór Laxness and have a meal with him. And he's written all these books. I read Salka Valka. I'm trying to be very careful to make his books last my lifetime, but I don't think that's going to happen because I'm almost done with the 10 or 12 books he's written.
And that's the other part of reading, right? Where there's this one book, it's so beautiful. It's called the Buru Quartet. It's a 4-part series, by this writer Pramod Anand Toyer. Starts from, that's one of the books.
I saw that.
And, starts about this, this character Minke, and who is in the late 1800s, like during the Dutch occupation. I think I'm getting the year correct, hopefully. And basically it also kind of mirrors the journey of the making of Indonesia in a way, right? And how Minke is evolving and Indonesia and the idea of Indonesia is evolving. So it's a 4-part series. And I am not finishing the 4th part completely because I want to, there is that, the sadness that kind of comes to me at times when you're finishing something. So I'm just like, read one page and then I'll be like, okay, let me pause and then I'll do that.
Yeah. Especially when writers have passed away.
Yeah, exactly.
I miss writers though, as if I've met them, Yeah. Actually, the ones I've met have not been that great, but no, they're just human. I didn't mean to suggest they were worse than others.
No, of course.
Please follow the library.
Of course.
I think that was the other thing you asked for, is who to follow. On Instagram, we're on Kitabe Bolti Hai, which is a Safdar Hashmi poem. And was that it?
And we'll of course tag everything and we'll put it on our show notes and everything. Of course, no, 100%. Oh no, any 2 things to watch or listen. Anything comes to mind. It can be anything under the sun.
My daughter told me to listen to Chinese rap, but I can't remember which. She told me to listen to it so I can recommend it to all the rappers in our library. Because she feels like they're being heavily influenced by one part of the world, but not another. I don't know what that means for your listenership or audience. And I didn't do it, so how can I recommend it? And I don't know which part of, China is a big country. I don't really watch or listen as much as I should to things. My comrade Akash is always sending me podcasts. I'll send this podcast to Akash. So he must be sending to lots of people.
So please do, again, we can include that. And finally, as we wrap up this beautiful conversation, you wrote a postcard to your future self.
Yes, when I came in, you had me write a postcard.
We made you. So if you don't mind sharing it out loud as one of a reader.
It is kind of like personal enough that I'm not sure. Okay, dear Mridula, how is the writing life? And I put that because I haven't written in 10, 11 years, but I hope 10 years from now that I will have been writing. And do you garden? I really miss growing things. So I hope I can garden again. It's been a long time. I hope you're not growing cabbages, because Amy used to say about organizing. She taught me organizing, and she used to say that when she was frustrated with us organizers, she was like the organizing director at the union I worked at, and we were a rather large team of organizers. We would go around organizing campaigns, and she would describe not organizing as growing cabbages on the hills. Her idea of having a useless life. Why would you grow cabbages? Amy would not approve. I hope this life has given writing back to you, and gardening and grandchildren. My children have said they won't have children, so I'm very worried about that. And finally, don't worry, the library is thriving without you. So I think I worry all the time about when I will stop working in the library. And that's a very individual concern. I don't think other people in the library are worried that they will not thrive when I'm not there. But that's why this is a very personal postcard.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mridula, for this wonderful, beautiful conversation.
Thank
I think
you.
I'm still consuming everything, so I'm slightly at loss for words because there's just so much that I learned, and I'm sure our listeners would also really appreciate listening to you. But thank you so much for making so much time today and sharing your thoughts so authentically and so beautifully. It was such a privilege to have you on the podcast.
You know, now I'm all nervous, and I wasn't nervous. I don't know why.
At the last moment.
Yeah, because it's done. Okay.
I
Thank
think
you.
Something about endings, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
or new beginnings.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course. And thank you everyone who watched our podcast today. Please like, share and subscribe. And if you have any thoughts about the episodes, if you have any questions from Mridula, please drop them in the comments. We'll send it to her. And if she gets some time, we can ask her to reply back and share some of her further, inspirations, some of her further reflections that we were not able to cover today. Thank you for joining, and see you very soon.